Good afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful day outside. I'm excited for us to get ready to meet today about our next session, and it's entitled Expectations. But before we do, let me just share with you a couple of resources that you can use if you'd like to during this study. I have gotten quite a bit of information from this book called The Hannah Promise. This is what it looks like. It's by Sandra Saylor. Also, I use my trusty little sparkling gems from the Greek by Rick Renner, and I like the Fire Bible, the Global Study Edition. It has great commentary in there, and it's written with the Holy Spirit perspective in mind. So today we are talking about expectations that we put on our husbands, on our friends, maybe on our coworkers, our bosses, and kind of what we expect from people and where our expectations need to be. So I'm going to be reading from you today out of the Hannah Promise, and it says, each year Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord of Heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. According to Strong's exhaustive concordance, Elkanah's name means God has possessed or God has created. The root of Elkanah's name finds its root in two words, one meaning God, godlike, mighty one, strength or power, and another means to get, acquire, create, buy, or possess. Elkanah was a man of great wealth and influence. His ancestors had established the territory in which he lived. Elkanah was from the tribe of Levi and a deeply devout man. He loved Hannah very much. However, with all his love, influence, power, and wealth, he could not give Hannah her deepest desire. If you've been married for very long, you have learned this about your husband. No matter how great your husband is, there are some things in life that only God can give. And that's the way it should be. It should be that we look to God with all our expectations. We make a mistake when we put our expectations for complete happiness in our mates, or in our friends, or our jobs. It sabotages the relationships. No mortal person can fill that innermost need. Our complete happiness, peace, joy, and fulfillment can only come from Abba Father. Psalm 62:5 says, my soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him. So a couple of questions that we have today as you reflect is, are there any unrealistic expectations you have placed upon your husband, or relationships, your friendships, in your job maybe? What are they, and how have they affected that relationship? Then we look at part B of this verse, and it stands in stark contrast to the first sentence. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, and according to Strong's exhaustive concordance, Hophni's name means fist and carries with it the meaning of someone who fights with their fist. Phinehas's name means mouth of brass. Its root is a variation of the word serpent. Eli's sons are described in 1 Samuel 2:12 through 17. Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels who had no respect for the Lord or for their duties as priest. Whenever anyone offered a sacrifice, Eli's sons would send over a servant with a three-pronged fork. While the meat of the sacrificed animal was still boiling, the servant would stick the fork into the pot and demand that whatever is brought up be given to Eli's sons. All the Israelites who came to worship at Shiloh were treated this way. Sometimes the servant would come even before the animal's fat had been on the altar. He would demand raw meat before it had been boiled so that it could be used for roasting. The man offering the sacrifice might reply, take as much as you want, but the fat must be burned first. Then the servant would demand, no, give it to me now or I'll take it by force. So the sin of these young men were very serious in the Lord's sight, for they treated the Lord's offerings with contempt. The King James Version states verse 12 as, now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial, they knew not the Lord. To know means to learn to know, to perceive, see, find out and discern, to know by experience or to be acquainted with. Hophni and Phinehas had no interest in the ways of God, as did their father. They did, however, have a sense of entitlement. Well, when children have a lack of boundaries, they begin to think it is their right to have and enjoy the benefits of another's sacrifice. In our pursuit to make our children happy, we can actually cripple them morally, emotionally, spiritually, and ethically. They begin to focus on their rights instead of their responsibilities. That's a scary place for your kids to be. And actually, if you look into, I looked here into my Fire Bible, and it talks about this, that Eli's sons were ministers who did not live holy lives. They misused the power of their position for personal gain and for the practice of sexual immorality. Their father Eli, the high priest, refused to discipline them or remove them from the priesthood. Then if you look over at 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 29, it goes on to say here, "Why do you scorn my sacrifice, an offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel?" And in the commentary here it says, Eli failed to provide enough spiritual leadership for his family, a choice that affected his leadership over Israel. As a father, he did not teach his sons to do what was right. When they seduced the women serving at the tent of the meeting, Eli's action showed neither the will nor the spiritual authority necessary to remove them from ministry. So our next question is, if you have children, can you see areas which this is evidenced in your children? What do you sense you need to do? And then read Judges chapter 3, verses 1 through 2. What do these scriptures communicate to you? And then the third point that we're going to make today is that if you look at this story, regardless even of what Hannah saw in Eli's own sons, she knew that her vow was not to Eli, to go and take her son and for him to live there in that, with Eli, and that Eli was going to be the one to basically raise up her son. And she saw what was happening in Eli's own sons. So you would think, as a mom, I probably would have been, I don't think so. That didn't turn out really well there. But Hannah had such a consecration to God that she knew that her vow was to him, and she still went on and of course, we know the story, took Samuel to Eli. And so she didn't allow their behavior to keep her from honoring her vow to bring Samuel to the tabernacle and leave him there. Even though the hypocrisy of some of the religious leaders was apparent, her dedication was to God and he could be trusted. So our last questions are there ways in which you've allowed the hypocrisy of others to deter you from the house of the Lord? And the very last one, how can we instruct our children, our friends, our family in such a way that the behavior of others will not keep them from loving Jesus and following after God with all their hearts? So glad to meet with you guys today. I'll post again in a few more days. We'll see you then.